Hi, ladies and gentlemen. This is Court Ranowski, publisher of Yankee T News. And for tonight's interview, we have here Ethan Book, who is a candidate for the 4th District of U.S. Congress. We hope and pray that he'll be the man, okay, who takes on Jim Himes. But in the meantime, he has a couple other hoops to jump through, and hopefully he won't have to primary this rather weak field of candidates that are out there that he's dealing with. So without further ado, the first part of this interview, I want to have Ethan just sort of lay out, his basic position on several things, and then we'll start to ask him a few questions.
Thank
Ethan,
you.
okay.
Thank you, Court, and thank you, Yankee T News. I'm honored to be here. I was honored a couple of weeks ago when Court gave me a call and said, Ethan, you know that candidates like endorsements of major media outfits. And I go, yeah, Court. And he goes, well, I want you to know that we at the Yankee T News have endorsed you. I said, phenomenal. I was floored. This is fantastic, and it's nice to be here with all of you. I knew Eric by social media, and now I've met him. I met Carola, Dila, and others here. You have a great group, and this is a great opportunity. I'd like to share just a few high points of my campaign. First, I'm one of 3 Republican candidates vying for the Republican nomination for candidate for 4th District Congress, that is to challenge Jim Himes in November. The Republican Party, the 4th District Convention will be making its decision on May 5th. That's just 3.5 weeks away. We can do it. Right now, I'm not considered, I would say I'm considered an underdog. The one in the top position is there, but I believe substance normally trumps style. And I have a good chance of prevailing as long as it's worked correctly. But I'd like to explain a little bit. First of all, there are 2 misunderstandings, misperceptions regarding the position or candidacy for for U.S. Congress in the 4th Congressional District. The first is, there is much discussion across Connecticut regarding the 5 congressional districts, that District 2 in the east and District 5 in the northwest are the ones that are closest to be able to flip from Democrat to Republican. Right now, all 5 are held by Democrats, and the ones where the talk is about flipping is mainly the 2nd and the 5th. What they underestimate, what the pundits and the mainstream, the conventional wisdom, Republican wisdom, it does not recognize the 4th District. I believe that's incorrect because the 4th District is good potential to flip. The second misunderstanding is that in order for a Republican to win, if the Republican is conservative on social issues, that candidate should either keep quiet or not be socially conservative. I don't agree. Now, I come from Bridgeport. That's not where I grew up, but that's where I've been living for the last 15 years and active politically. In Bridgeport, I have been active politically. I've run for state rep 4 times in the 128th district, which is central portion of Bridgeport. The first time I ran in 2014, the Democrat to Republican voter ratio was greater than 20 to 1. When I campaign, I'm out, I knock on doors a lot. I have a knack for getting voter registrations. And by 2020, when that campaign was over, when that election was over, the Democrat to Republican voter registration ratio in the 128th district was less than 13 to 1. That's a big reduction. That's 35% in 6 years during a period where people would not have expected that in an urban district during that period of time. I can also say that the votes that I got while in that kind of a setting weren't enough to win the elections. I typically got more than double the portion of total Republican to Democrat voters than there are in the district. Now, if we overlay that experience with the 4th Congressional District, where the Democrat to Republican voter registration ratio is 3-2, I'm in striking distance already, even forgetting the pendulum that's swinging conservative at this point. So that's some background to keep in mind. Plus, what I've done is in the urban area. So when I ran in 2020, and I was going out to knock on doors and talk to voters and say, "Hi, I'm Ethan Book. I'm Republican candidate for state rep." Or if we want to say it the way I said sometimes on the east side, "Buenas tardes, yo soy Ethan Book, candidato republicano para representante estatal." I lived for 8 years in Latin America. I speak Spanish, which is a tremendous asset. But anyhow, as I did this, I got the impression that people would respond and say, "Oh yeah, that's interesting," but I got the impression that they really didn't understand what it was. So I set out to review and determine basic points of Republican ideology. I came up with 4 points. First, Republicans tend to be conservative on budget and taxing matters.
Right.
Second, Republicans, now they're not always conservative, but tend to be conservative, more conservative than Democrat. We can work on that, but that's a tendency. Second is Republicans tend to be more conservative on social issues. That's right, that's where I am. Third, Republicans tend to be strict constitutionalists. That is, a reference and adhering to the fact that we are a constitutional republic where there is the rule of law. We just don't make the law what we want it to be, which is what the other side tends to do. The fourth point, and all of these are important and they interrelate, Republicans tend more to affirm that we are a Judeo-Christian nation. All of these points are very important, and this is a cornerstone to my campaign. After I did that, I set out to identify what are the basic points of Democrat Party ideology. I couldn't find any. What I found was that there is a dominant Democrat focus on human compassion. Now that's not necessarily bad as long as there are reasonable guidelines and limitations on the human compassion. But where there are not reasonable guidelines and guidelines and limitations on that focus of human compassion, there tends over time to be urban decline. There is always urban decline. And that's the problem of the Democrat. So what I just shared here is a cornerstone of my campaign. And this is something that basically I just need to sing and repeat because this is where I win. This is where I win. That's the starting point, Cor. What do you think?
Okay, well, I think that's pretty good. I think one of the things a lot of people are wondering about for openers would be the, let's say, social issues. And let's start by talking about, I don't know, abortion.
Well, that's interesting. My starting point into the big political arena in Connecticut, and this was back when I met you, Court, in 2010,
Yep.
when I was a candidate for the U.S. Senate. I could not sit back and be silent with Blumenthal coming out the day that he announced his candidacy that he's going to fight for everyone no matter what the party. I mean, I knew this was another bunch of you-know-what, some of that stuff that they were testing in New Haven or whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Part of the, sure.
Okay.
So go ahead. So with abortion.
So since the pro-life versus abortion issue was an issue at that time, I decided to do something to study it, to review it. I did something that very few political figures do. I read Roe versus Wade, the entire 51 pages. Okay. I got some impressions of it, and I'm not a licensed attorney, but I have a legal mind. I got some impressions, and then I went to several commentaries, and I got some more impressions, and I put together a 6-page critique, and that, by the way, is on my website. If you look under that plank of conservative on social issues, if you open that up, you'll see a paragraph where it talks about my critique of Roe versus Wade. There are a couple of points on there. First of all, there was never the quantum of evidence necessary for the federal court to overturn a state statute. You're supposed to have a preponderance of evidence in order for the federal court to consider that. They did not have it. But there's something else that jumps out regarding the decision. The Supreme Court, talking about the privacy right for a woman to consider abortion, said, we think that this is found in the 14th Amendment, but if it's not there, then it's in the 9th Amendment. Okay?
Oh,
now, well, wait a minute. These
Sure,
are
yeah,
Supreme
yeah.
Court justices? And now it could not have been the 14th Amendment because the 14th Amendment deals with local and state government action.
Yeah, but the Ninth Amendment is also called the Silent Amendment.
Well, but we'll get to that. There's no way that you could consider that a woman making a decision with her physician is state or government local action. So if there's any privacy issue or privacy right, it would be in the 9th Amendment, which is those rights that are reserved for the people.
Right.
But the problem there is, well, the Supreme Court did acknowledge that there is no absolute privacy right for anything. They are correct. In every case that I reviewed, case decision that I reviewed, there was always a consideration of the context, like a social compact in considering privacy right. Nonetheless, the court said for considering a decision for abortion, a woman has a privacy right to do that. I say that's wrong because what they miss is if you're going to consider the privacy right of the woman, you need to also consider the privacy right of the father and the fetus. That changes the whole equation. Right. Now, that's one point. But then there's another area which I call spiritual. There's a spiritual aspect to the abortion issue. And that comes from Old Testament, ancient Jewish history, where there was the period of the kings. There were some good kings and bad kings. The worst king was King Ahab with his wife Jezebel, which was he was the king right before the destruction of Jerusalem in the 6th century BC. And the Jewish nation was straying from God's rules, God's norms, God's regulations and guidelines, shall we say. And God was warning the nation that if they didn't clean up their act, God would take away his hand of protection and the nation would be invaded. The two collective national sins were child sacrifice and sexual perversion. There is an author that I have read, he's a New York Times bestseller, Jonathan Cahn, who wrote the book The Harbinger, where he has studied very carefully ancient Jewish history with current events, and the parallels are so specific that it is compelling. It's evident to me that God has been warning our nation to clean up our act in areas of child sacrifice, the parallel abortion, and sexual perversion, that if we don't clean up our act, he will take his hand of protection away from our nation and we will be invaded. Well, it looks like he is gradually doing all of that, and we need to be aware of what's happening.
Right. Well, one of the other corollaries of what you're talking about is just good old garden variety, plain vanilla child sex trafficking.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It all overlays and goes together.
Yeah.
I mean, and also the problem of the child sex trafficking is that it's underreported and under-prosecuted.
Oh, yeah. The secret word of the night, sabotage. Just wanted to throw that in there. So, okay, it's important. You got to get over this first hump. But how are you going to really, take it to the $70 million communist? That's what we want to know.
Well, Jim Himes is vulnerable. The incumbent, he spent 4 years as a leading member of the Domestic Intelligence Committee, hammering publicly this theme that there was evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. And the media was following him, the mainstream media and the social media was following him. That had an impact on the outcome of the 2020 election. Mm-hmm. And now we have Biden, and basically Jim Himes gave us Biden. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think he is vulnerable. I think he is vulnerable. Also, he is touted as being a moderate Democrat. he is one of the leaders in the Democrat Congressional Progressive Caucus.
Right. Yes, they lie.
A lot
They
of
lie.
people don't are not aware of this.
Right. So it's up to us to make people aware. All right. So I guess we'll, at this point, I really feel like, Ethan, we're just scratching the surface here.
I agree.
In
I
terms of what
agree.
you're talking about.
We need 3 more sessions.
Yeah, well, we could arrange that. Okay.
I have some points where I have a much more favored position for getting the urban vote than the other 2 candidates. I lived in Latin America. I speak Spanish. Our previous Republican congressman, Chris Shays, had been in the Peace Corps. I've been in the Peace Corps for 9 years. I was a member of the board of directors of the El Alfarero Hispanic Prison Ministry. I'm a member of the Neighborhood Revitalization Zone. I have a small business. I live in the center of Bridgeport in an inner city area called the Hollow. I am comfortable. Oh, one other thing is that I've been big on dealing with this issue of election integrity. There's a page on my website dealing with that. So I have a number of advantages for campaigning in the urban areas and winning votes.